Welcome back to Hopper's Hot Rods. It's been a minute since we worked on the Challenger. I've got to check the list. I know we need to set the timing, make a few adjustments, make sure the electric cooling fan is working. There's some weather stripping, handful of stuff, but this thing is so close to being done, gone, finished. Take 22. I bought a couple things that'll go with the aesthetic of the engine, coolant overflow, the proper size air filter, little stuff like that. So let's get this thing put together and let's get started. Cue the music. Oh, I'm alone. I'll cue the music. This thing is probably straight and the whole building is slightly crooked, maybe. When you start working on things, you forget to do things that you're supposed to do. And then after you work on it for a while, you remember to do them. But then after you do it for long enough, you remember to do them, but you can't remember why. And then hopefully, eventually, you'll do them and you won't care why. Which is really isn't that what we all are hoping for? So I started this thing up and drove it over here. So why would I connect this little baby battery charger to it? I'll tell you. Well, the producers asked me to explain why I would do that. Because I'm going to be working on it for a while with the doors open, the ignition connected, connecting timing lights and wiring. And all vehicles require a decent amount of power to run. Older cars only need about 6 volts, but fuel injected cars need like 11.5 volts minimum. So if the battery gets down like to 10.5 or 9.5 volts, the engine will spin over, but it won't start. The computer doesn't like it, etc. And to avoid the slack-jawed stare that lasts for 30 minutes, wondering, what did I do to break it now? While I work on it, I leave it connected to a trickle charger. So even if I disconnect the battery for a while, leave it connected, when I get ready to start it, at least that's not the problem. It's something else that I've done. Anyway, you get the idea. And it's also good to know that it's a healthy battery. And when you connect it to a battery charger, they usually have it'll tell you if it's bad, if it's not taking a charge. So it's just one of the things you do. It's one of the things you do. It's a good practice. That's what it is. It's a good practice to do that when you're working on a car. So it's something I'm not sponsored by any products or companies, as most of you know. I've announced it a few times, but you can get this thing at Walmart. Holy crap, these are great. Not only will it charge your phone if you end up without a phone somewhere, but look at that. Now you can see what you're doing. They last for a while. You can actually put an angle on it. You do it this way, angle it down, angle it up. They're like 15, 20 bucks. In the tradition of dessert first, we'll play with the cool parts that have nothing to do with its running. This thing looked a lot bigger on Amazon or wherever the producers bought them. It's an overflow tank, and that probably doesn't have to be very big, but it's black and it matches the aesthetic of the engine compartment. I could put one of those plastic ones with the red plastic cap on there very inexpensively instead of spending $20, $30. But it wouldn't look right in this thing, so we want it to look right. I want it to look right. I don't want it to stick out. So I sure thought it was bigger though. This is kind of dumb. It's fine for a catch can, but it's got an O-ring seal. This thing is, listed as a coolant oil catch can, and it's got an O-ring. So that's great and everything, but now it can't breathe. So liquid can't go in. Pressure would have to come out of the pressure rated radiator cap. And so, I mean, I'm gonna have to drill a small hole, you know, just to let air out and let air in when it needs to take coolant back out. It's kind of dumb. What are you gonna do? You know, at a glance, I thought it was just some schmutz on the lid, but the thing I was complaining about, forget that, it's fine. Take 22. This is the coolant reservoir overflow, and you'll see that they engineered a small hole to let air out as coolant needs to go in or come back out. It's a quality product by Evil Energy. Oh, now we got this high performance air filter, which I'm hoping is not as high in the literal, not the descriptive, as the one that was too high for the hood. That should give us the clearance we need. Let's put these on. Hold on. Cut. I gotta kill the music. Take 22. Although I'd be surprised if I got sued by any of the Edsels from 1958 for using a snippet of Ramalama Ding Dong on the video, but you know, you're not supposed to do it, so I don't do it. Half-inch stubby wrench, the distributor. Timing the engine, timing. Did you catch what I'm doing there? Poor timing. We've got a lead coming from the number one. Here, come here, I'll show you. Okay, on the Chrysler 440, this cylinder on the front of the driver's side is the one designated by the factory as the number one cylinder, and that is where this slightly melted old spring is stuck in between the spark plug boot and the plug itself. There, you can see it. And it connects to the timing gun, because the timing light is just too peaceful. This has to be a timing gun. They had to shape it like a pistol. Awesome. All right, we've got it clipped to engine ground, and admittedly aluminum is a rather crappy ground, but it's just easy to access, and we'll also be able to determine that our engine is well grounded. And then behind the alternator is where the 12 volt positive clip is, you know, clipped, because the battery, it's in the trunk. Okay, here's the engine. The harmonic balancer is on this main pulley, and you might notice that it's a little rusty and crusty. When they dressed up this engine, they didn't detail everything, but this here, and on the harmonic balancer there's a spot that I've highlighted, so when it's running with the strobe on, hopefully on the video you'll be able to see if the firing is happening before top dead center or after top dead center. In theory, it should generally happen before top dead center, and I'll explain that in a minute. What are we really talking about here? What's the essence of what we're talking about here? I'll spell it out for you if I have to. Ignition. Ignition. Hey, we can say it. We're big kids now, can't we? You know, a lot of times it'll help to understand a word if you break it down. So let's do that now, shall we? Doesn't really mean anything. Forget about that. Nitwit. You know, I think we all understand nitwit. And shun, from the Latin, to shun, to say, nuh-uh, no thank you, to push away, doesn't really belong in this word. Forget about that. You know, I feel a lot of love in this room. I don't know where, it was here a minute ago, and it was beautiful, I gotta tell you. Doctors of geometry, which are called geometrists, call a circle, all right? Now, when you got a circle, some math nerd decided a long time ago to divide it up in 360 degrees. It could have been 400. That would have been easier. Because then you'd have said, hey, what's 10% of a circle? 40? But they broke it down to 360 degrees. So, when a piston is moving up and down, this part of the connecting rod, this is the piston, this is the wrist pin of the piston. The piston moves in a linear up and down motion, but the bottom part moves in a circle. So, when you hear the term top dead center, it's 0 degrees measured in the top and the dead center of the stroke of the piston. It's right at the very tip top. That's your 0. All right? Now, the ignition of the fuel and air that makes the little explosion that pushes the piston down, well, it makes sense that it would be after top dead center to push the piston downward so it would have the momentum to come back up. Because if you had the explosion igniting before top dead center, it would try to shove the piston back the other direction. Really. But with momentum and things moving as fast as they do, it takes just a millisecond to expand all the fuel and air as it burns in the combustion chamber. In order to have the maximum amount of thrust downward, that explosion has to happen on that downstroke, but it has to be lit or ignited just a moment before so that it can have that expansion at the correct time, or engine timing. You'll hear that a lot. So it gets ignited a few degrees before. And this IT, those are initials that we're going to use for initial timing. You see what I did there? I used initials. And then there's total timing, and we'll get to that in a second. So initial timing is when the engine is idling. At what point should the spark light the fuel and air for it to be the most efficient push down that it can be? And that can range anywhere from 2 to 12 degrees. And it kind of depends on a few factors that I'm not worried about trying to figure out or explain. But now you understand that it's when it's lit, not when the explosion actually happens. So then there's the why is it not just 12 degrees timing the whole time? What the hell? Why does it advance? Well, because just because your engine spins faster, it doesn't mean fuel and air will burn any faster. It's a constant. So to still get the maximum push, you have to light that fuse earlier and earlier and earlier, the faster your engine spins, so that it still pushes down at the right time. And that ends up being 32, 34, sometimes 36 degrees before top dead center. And there's a few mechanisms on older mechanical systems to handle that. There's a vacuum advance that uses your engine vacuum to adjust your timing when you're driving. But that's more advantageous on a stock engine. When you put a hot cam in an engine, you change the engine's vacuum characteristics, therefore you change that part of the advance mechanism. And there's a mechanical advance, which in older distributors, there's a set of weights that, as the thing spins faster, they spin and move the distributor plate and advance the timing because it knows the engine's going faster. If you go back long enough in automotive history, there was a spark advance on the steering column, and if you just drove and you didn't change the ignition timing with your advance, you lost power because the push would come later and later in that stroke. That's timing. Now we can get back to the projects. That's what people want to see, is footage of me cursing trying to find the right size wrench. I'm just going to snug down the retainer bolt for the distributor so it doesn't wander from where we've set it. And while I'm under here, I'll grab the wrong wrench. Since the engine has been heat cycled a couple of times, I'm just going to go through and make sure all these intake bolts are snug. We're also going to top off the coolant and put some in the overflow reservoir that we installed. Let's throw a wrench on that too, shall we? Keep it nice and snug. Now I installed this overflow about 6 inches lower than the radiator, and that's fine. The height of the overflow is arbitrary. It doesn't have anything to do with the height of the radiator because it overflows based on pressure. There we go. Got a little overflow there. And so it'll have its own level, separate from the radiator. They don't have to be, they aren't gravity leveled to each other. There we go. Now we got a little in there, got a little up here. And so when this thing heats up and pressure comes out in the form of air, when it cools off, it draws a little in. It'll draw in liquid because the air can escape through this hole in the top of this reservoir. And that way your coolant system doesn't have much air in it trying to circulate through with air pockets. It's I made it down the street to the local car museum, leaving it outside for some free advertising for a minute. There we go. Get it finished. Big deal. There will be another video with a longer test drive when I knock out a few more details the next time I get a chance to work on it. Thanks very much for watching. See you real soon.